So Metal Bat's back. That's pretty cool, right? I think it's been almost a year since we've seen him. I think it was like chapter 131, maybe the last time we saw him. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he showed up in a panel or two, you know, in the last year or so, but that chapter 131 came out like April last year. And in that chapter, we saw that Metal Bat was basically like forcefully discharging himself. And of course he was in there because of his battles with Elder Centipede and Garo. And he saw that, you know, the Monster Association had come out of the ground and there was just, you know, chaos breaking loose everywhere. So he was like, okay, I gotta go there. You know, I'm not just gonna chill here, especially considering we know he is Metal Bat and how Metal Bat is. Now he's finally made it here, or almost made it there. He's closer than he's ever been at this point. Let me also mention again that Metal Bat is not a part of this battle in the original continuity in the webcomic. Metal Bat is like a complete wild card here, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he's going to do in this big like final third act battle. So coincidentally, at the same time, King and Tario are converging on the same point as Metal Bat, and they come across like this weird like distortion. And it turns out it's that tank military van thing that we saw back in chapter 120 when Genos had like dropped off the injured support team to Sekengar and them. And it's also being revealed here that it has a quantum stealth shield, which I guess just gives it almost straight invisibility, which is pretty interesting. I wonder if they're showing us this for a reason, meaning that like maybe this might come back and play more importance into like a later part of the story maybe, or it's just, I don't know, tying up this one plot point here as to how they weren't spotted by like ancillary monsters or something. But they're saying here that the road collapsed and they got stuck and they weren't able to call for rescue helicopters because there was a risk of being spotted. And it also turns out that Mohican and Pineapple are on board this thing as well, and we'll get more into them in a bit because they're kind of just here to have the whole Metal Bat Waganma little mini storyline come full circle. So we're also getting a reunion between Waganma and Tario here, and this sequence I guess is just completing the full-blown redemption of Waganma. We even see Waganma like worried about Child Emperor. He's like, you know, is he okay? He saved us. You gotta go help Child Emperor. He's also asking Tario like, hey, who saved you? He's like, well, Uncle saved me. Like Tario keeps calling Garo Uncle in this chapter. It makes me wonder if Tario like, does he even know Garo's name? I mean, maybe he does. I haven't gone back and reread all of those chapters to make sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if like Garo never says to Tario like, hey, my name's Garo. Maybe he does, I don't remember. But also, you know, him calling him uncle here leaves that ambiguous, as we'll see later on when King asks who he is. Because if Tario's just like, hey, please save Garo, they're gonna be like, oh, the hero hunter? We're actually gonna execute him. But anyway, going back to Waganma saying like, hey, please save Child Emperor. He saved me, he ran out of weapons, he was looking in bad shape. This goes back to, of course, like the whole Phoenix Man thing. And I've covered all of this stuff in previous videos from last year. Check out my redraws and retcons playlist. I'll have it available at the end of this video. But going further into that, Child Emperor like eventually got Waganma to the surface, handed him off to the support team, and then he went back into the battle, and we know where he is now because, you know, he showed up in the previous chapter. And then that also brings me to the thing I said about Metal Bat like cementing that he's had a redemption, because he's like, is this the same kid who was putting those dishes back on the belt at the sushi bar? And this is going back to that moment in season 2 when I guess Metal Bat was assigned to be like the bodyguard of Narinki, who is Waganma's dad, and then Waganma at the same time, and they were like eating at the sushi restaurant. That's when like Junior Centipede showed up, and then the other centipedes came after that. But speaking of that whole sequence, it goes back to the thing that I was saying about, you know, that coming full circle into this chapter, because we see Mohican and Pineapple like apologizing to Metal Bat for basically failing in protecting Waganma. Because while Metal Bat was defending them, Elder Centipede eventually showed up, and he kind of had to, you know, take care of business against him, but he also couldn't watch after Narinki and Waganma at the same time, who were unconscious at this point because of like sleeping gas. And Metal Bat was like, hey, you two, take care of them. Then of course Metal Bat went on to fight Elder Centipede, and then Garo stepped in, and then he had to fight Garo. And while all this was happening, Rhino Wrestler, Phoenix Man, and Sludge Jellyfish showed up, and they kind of like, you know, easily overpowered Mohican and Pineapple, because, you know, it was Rhino Wrestler, player who is a demon going against, you know, a B and a C class hero. And then he grabbed Waganma once they were out of the picture. And then Elder Centipede like snatched them up and then went underground. And then that was like the chain of events that started the whole strike team and the raid and what's leading us to what's going on right now. But Metal Bat's like, hey guys, you know what? It's all right. Don't worry about it. We're all heroes. I owe you a big one too. So let's pay these debts properly. A man's at his strongest when he's got a debt to settle. But then Mohican and Pineapple continue to sulk. They're like, you know, the gap between us and the S class is so vast. We're basically just useless. And then Second Gar, who was also on this military bus tank van thing, he comes out. He's like, hey, gaps in power don't matter. We do what we can with the hand we're given. And he puts up his lack of a hand, showing that like, hey, you know what? I got messed up in this thing too, but I'm still doing everything I can. And Second Gar, of course, lost his hand. And I think chapter 119, when he was like talking to Drive Knight, and Drive Knight was just, you know, spouting his, you know, nonsensical rhetoric to him. And then G5 conveniently showed up and like shot his beam and took Second Gar's hand off. Once Second Gar was going to try to contact the Hero Association. But then Second Gar starts to brief Metal Bat and King, and he's like, we haven't received confirmation of the extermination of most of the enemy cadres, so those threats remain alive. Both of you will be waiting on standby in an area where you can keep track of the battle, so you can join the backup as secret support whenever you want to. So I guess that's going to be the plan here for Metal Bat and King. They're kind of just going to be at a certain point, which we'll see them go to in this chapter. And then I guess when things get really bad, or if they do, then they could be like that secret backup. And then Mohican and Pineapple are left to guard Tario and Waganma, I guess. And then Metal Bat gasses up Second Gar and he's like, not gonna lie, I thought the Hero Association executives were all helpless losers. Got more like you in there? Roger, boss. And then we have a nice little camaraderie moment there. And then King, of course, starts thinking that he's useless internally. And then he remembers the whole Elder Centipede thing where he lured Elder Centipede in and then had Saitama come from the back and serious punch him. And he's like, Saitama will come for sure. Until then, I'll do what I can. So King is starting to catch on to, you know, how his dynamic works within this series. And then we're coming back to that sequence I was talking about where Tario is talking to King when he's like, please save Uncle. Then he remembers Garo telling him that, you know, I'm a monster. So I guess it's just reminding us to like, hey guys, Garo's still out there. He's still a big element of this arc. He's still gonna, you know, make his entrance. So just don't forget that he's still a big player here. So then Metal Bat decides to do some crazy battle manga magic here. And he takes a tire and like turns it into a slingshot, using a truck as like an anchor for it. And with the assistance of Second Gar, he like catapults him and King like deep into Z City, to the location of where, you know, Second Gar asked them to go, I guess, where they're going to be secret backup. And then they like hit this batting cage and then they, you know, fall down and then they're in position, I guess. And then Metal Bat's like, all right, let's go. But going back to what I was talking about with Metal Bat being a wild card, I don't know what's going to happen with him in this arc. I certainly hope that he's just not going to sit here and be the secret backup. I hope he charges straight into that battle and helps them, you know, going against the Cadres, because I'd love to see Metal Bat go against the Cadres. And I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. But that's pretty much it for this one. Let me know what you guys think about this chapter in the comments. If you liked the video, guys, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day and I'll see you in the next one.